Good afternoon, everyone. As I said, my name is Roisin Kosser, and I am the professor and head of the Department of History here at the University of Manitoba. And I'd like to welcome you to the 2025 Tony T.K. Lau Lecture on Contemporary China. I am pleased and excited to be your MC for today's event. And it's amazing that this is now the fourth time that we have convened for this lecture, and I'm very happy to have attended all four. Each year that I've attended this lecture, I've seen how we have a unique and distinguished guest who has helped us all learn about and understand a wide variety of topics related to China, Canada, and the world. And of course, this is always a chance for us also to welcome back to campus and say thank you to our host, Tony Lau, a generous supporter of the Faculty of Arts and the University of Manitoba. And Tony is here today, and you'll have a chance to meet him in a few minutes. I'd like to pause for a moment and share that the University of Manitoba campuses and research spaces are located on original lands of Anishinaabeg, Ininiwak, and Chininawuk, Dakota Oyate, Dene, and Inuit, and on the national homeland of the Red River Métis. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories, and we acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past. And we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. And as we look towards Truth and Reconciliation Week next week, from the 22nd until the 26th of September, and the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation on September the 30th, I'm thinking again about those words and what they mean to our community. And I certainly invite you to do the same. Just a quick word of notice that this event is being recorded for posting to YouTube, and photographs and video will be taken throughout the presentation and reception, and they are going to be used for promotional purposes. And I can barely see you, but if you would prefer not to be included in posted media, I'd like you to identify yourself by raising your hand, and we'll do our best to avoid your area. And I'm sure that Joseph will be keeping an eye out. He can see better than I can. All right, we have an exciting afternoon planned for you today, with the highlight, of course, being our keynote speaker, Dr. Carla P. Freeman, who has joined us from Johns Hopkins University to share her insights. And don't forget that you will have the chance to ask Dr. Freeman questions during the Q&A, which will take place directly after the keynote. I'll have a few questions planned to get us going, but I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. And every year that I've attended this lecture, I've always been very struck, particularly by questions from students. So if you're a student member of the audience and you're listening and you think I'd like to be brave and try and ask a question, please do. We welcome them. I'd now like to call upon Dr. Heidi Marks, Dean of the Faculty of Arts, to say a few words. Heidi.
Thank you, Roisin. On behalf of the Faculty of Arts, I'd like to welcome each of you to this distinguished annual event. It is wonderful to see an audience that includes a mixture of students, alumni, faculty, and members of the greater Winnipeg community who are all here as a result of Tony's vision to bring us together to learn more about contemporary issues related to China. Gathering together in scholarship advances our overall understanding of the world. Each year, our visiting speakers bring a different perspective, whether that be on trade wars, the economy, human rights crises, social problems, or environmental challenges. Not only does it advance our knowledge, but it can also be helpful, as some of us may study China, work in China, or work with colleagues or companies based in China in the future. We are most grateful to all of you for attending this special event, and we thank you for taking the time to partake in this scholarship and to support the vision of alumni such as Tony Lau. This afternoon, we are so pleased to welcome Dr. Carla P. Freeman as our keynote speaker, who joins us through the generosity of Tony Lau. And Tony will tell us more about Dr. Freeman in a few moments. Tony is a longtime friend of the Faculty of Arts. He came to the University of Manitoba in the late 1960s and earned his Bachelor of Arts degree with us in 1971. While a student at the U of M, Tony immersed himself in university life, participating in many activities with the Chinese Students Association, competing with the U of M table tennis team, and serving as president of the U of M International Students Organization in 1971 and 72. Tony then moved on to the University of Toronto to complete a Master of Arts degree. In 1981, he founded Tony Lau Insurance Agencies Limited in British Columbia, where he continues today as president and CEO. Tony's connection to the University of Manitoba remains strong and led him, along with a small group of others, to found the University of Manitoba Chinese Alumni Association of Canada, of which he is the current president. Michael Ng, a longtime fellow association member, also joins us today from Vancouver. Welcome back, Michael. It's good to see you again this year. This lecture was established in honor of the Chinese Alumni Association. Over the past 25 years, Tony has donated over $300,000 to the University of Manitoba in many areas. First, he established this lectureship in 2019 with a $100,000 gift, along with an award that recognizes students who volunteer to assist other international students to adapt to Canada and university life. There is also an academic prize that recognizes student achievement in the study of Chinese history. And recently, a gift in 2024 of $100,000, which helped to construct the Tony T.K. Lau Global Lounge in the U of M International Center. Tony's philanthropic endeavors have enriched the university experience for countless students and have contributed significantly to the advancement of international education and understanding on campus. Tony, we are thankful for your generosity, your dedication to helping students, and your commitment to help further all of our understanding of the role China plays in our world. The Tony T.K. Lau Lecture on Contemporary China brings distinguished individuals to the University of Manitoba to speak about various issues and timely topics. In 2022, we welcomed Dr. Gregory Chin from York University, who spoke on the trade war between the U.S. and China and how this impacts Canada and the world. In 2023, Dr. Pascal Massot from the University of Ottawa recommended that we carefully study the government of China's past behaviors to help us better respond to their future behaviors. Last year, Dr. Paul Bowles from the University of Northern British Columbia joined us to explain how China's many transitions over the past 50 years have impacted not only China's economy, but also the policies and relationships of China with other countries, including Canada. For anyone who may have missed one of those presentations, I have some good news for you. All three of these past lectures are available to be viewed on the Faculty of Arts YouTube channel, which is easy to reach from our website. And today I'm looking forward to hearing Dr. Freeman's take on the U.S.-China relationship, where it is headed, and what does it mean for the world. Dr. Freeman joins us from Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies in Washington, D.C. Welcome to Winnipeg, Dr. Freeman. As you listen today, I encourage each of you to consider questions for Dr. Freeman. Let's take advantage of her being here, sharing her knowledge and expertise with us. As Rasheen mentioned, there will be a Q&A directly after her talk where we can keep the discussion going. This will then be followed by a reception in the lobby of the theater. I hope you enjoy today's event. I know I'm looking forward to hearing Dr. Freeman's thoughts on not just current frictions, but also potentially your hope for positive developments and relations for China and Canada in the future. And if you like what you see here, I also encourage you to look for more opportunities to engage with the Faculty of Arts throughout the year. Visit our website or social media anytime to learn about many other ways to continue growing and learning, such as writers' workshops, the Ukrainian-Canadian Book Club, film screening events, and many more guest speakers like Dr. Freeman on an unending array of topics. Finally, I invite you to come back to this very theater twice a year, once in the fall and once in the winter, to attend one of our outstanding student theater productions. There's plenty of activity happening here in the Faculty of Arts at the University of Manitoba. Please come back and join us again anytime. Now, before Tony comes up to formally introduce Dr. Freeman, I'm going to turn things back to Rasheen, who will lead a special presentation for us. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Heidi. And indeed, It's really my pleasure to participate in the next event, and I'd actually like to ask Tony to join me up on the stage because we are excited to have the opportunity to have our donor, Tony Lau, present the Tony T.K. Lau Prize to the 2024-25 winner of that prize, which is awarded to a student who has achieved the highest standing in a course with significant coverage of the history of China. So I'm going to ask Tony and also Grayson Andrews to please join us up on the stage. And they're going to, that's right. Grayson is an arts student who is looking to pursue an honors degree in history with a minor in sociology. Last year, they took 2 courses related to China, Chinese civilizations through our Asian Studies program, and the history course for which they achieved top marks and this prize, the history of the People's Republic of China, 1949 to the present. We asked Grayson why they chose these courses for their studies, and they shared that they understand that China is a major global actor in the modern world. They felt that China can often be portrayed in media with a political agenda in mind, so they were hoping to learn more and gain an unbiased perspective on modern China for themselves. This viewpoint on education over bias should serve Grayson well as they continue their studies and into their future career, and Grayson was sharing with me earlier that they're hoping indeed to pursue graduate studies. Grayson, congratulations on achieving the top mark in the course. And Tony, if you'd like to present the certificate, or perhaps you've already done so. Well, let's congratulate Grayson. Wonderful. Congratulations again, Grayson. It's lovely to have you with us today for this special event. It's quite rare, actually, that a student prize winner is able to meet the donor of that prize in person. So we're very pleased that this was able to happen. So thanks again. And I'd now like to invite Tony to the podium to say a few words and to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Freeman. Tony.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Tony T.K. Lau Lecture on Contemporary China. I am so happy to be back on campus now from Vancouver. I moved to Vancouver some years ago, and every year when I visit the campus, I feel so happy. And especially today, I also want to welcome my former professor from the University College, Professor Henry Heller. So it was, I live in Vancouver, but I was born and raised in Hong Kong. And over many years ago, say half a century ago, I decided to study as an international student in Canada. So I didn't know anyone in Canada, so it was just out of luck. I chose University of Manitoba. It worked out well. I had very fantastic professors teaching me, and I met many friends. It worked out well. And I was really lucky that many years later, I am able to maintain meaningful relationship with the University of Manitoba. I feel that very lucky this afternoon to welcome a prominent scholar to speak on China. Now, Dr. Carla P. Freeman is director of the Foreign Institute and senior lecturer in international affairs at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, or SAIS for short, in Washington, D.C. She is also a member of the board of the Austrian Institute for International Affairs in Vienna, Austria, and a non-resident senior fellow with the Institute of Security and Development in Stockholm, Sweden. Previously, Dr. Freeman was senior expert for China with the United States Institute of Peace, or USIP, following more than a decade and a half in academia. In 2020, Dr. Freeman held the appointment of Library of Congress Chair in U.S.-China relations. She also served as interim American Director of the Hopkins Nanjing Center in Nanjing, China, and taught for a term at Yangon University. Prior to joining the SAIS faculty, she was a risk analyst and foundation program officer. While she was a PhD student, she was a Randolph Jennings Peace Scholar at USIP, conducting research on China-North Korea relations. She has also been a visiting scholar at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences and Harvard University's Fairbank Center. Her career working on China began with a summer job in the Science and Technology Office at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. Dr. Freeman writes on the linkages between China's foreign and domestic policy, as well as on U.S.-China relations. She has published dozens of articles and commentaries. Recent and forthcoming academic publications include writings on China-Southeast Asia relations, China's Belt and Road Initiative, China's global policy initiatives, and foreign policy and China in space. She has also published policy reports this year on reassurance and U.S.-China relations and U.S.-China signaling behavior. In addition, she is editor of multiple edited volumes, including Handbook of China and Developing Countries, China and North Korea, Strategic and Policy Perspectives from a Changing China, Managing Fragile Regions, and the co-authored monograph, China and on the Edge, Chinese Border Provinces and Chinese Security Policy. She was the editor-in-chief of the peer-reviewed journal, Asian Perspective, for many years. She is the lead faculty advisor for the SAI's Review of International Affairs. She is currently working on a book on China's rise as an actor in outer space, the polar regions, and the oceans. Dr. Freeman is a graduate of Yale University, BA History and Southeast Asia, Beijing Language and Culture University Certificate, Sciences Po in Paris Certificate, and the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, MA, and PhD, writing her dissertation on Northeast China. She's the daughter of a diplomat and spent much of her youth with her family in Asia, including India, Taiwan, Thailand, and China. She's married and has 2 children. We are indeed honored and lucky to have Dr. Freeman as our speaker. Dr. Freeman. Please.
Well, that was a very, very kind introduction and set me up to fail by setting expectations far too high. But it's wonderful to join you, and let me try to figure out how to look at my computer. I made the mistake of continuing to work on my speech, so it is going to be overly long, but I hope track some recent developments, and you'll bear with me as because I've really overpacked it. But good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the University of Manitoba, to Professor Rasheen Kausar for the wonderful welcome, Dean Heidi Marks, I'm delighted to meet, and of course, Tony Lau for his wonderful introduction, his warm welcome, and for giving me the opportunity to be the 4th speaker in the Tony Lau lecture series. I'm very pleased to talk about the state of U.S.-China relations, the future of the U.S.-China relationship, and what this might mean for the world. I will touch a little bit, kind of hesitantly, on what it might mean for China-Canada relations, and look forward to engaging with you more on that topic during the Q&A. So, what is the current state of U.S.-China relations? Good descriptors include phrases like intensifying tensions, rising mutual suspicions, rising mutual insecurity. Tensions between the two countries run the gamut of political, ideological, geopolitical dimensions alongside intensifying military competition, technological, and economic rivalry. The two countries, though, are not in a Cold War like the US-USSR were from the 1950s to the early 1990s. Trade remains a very significant part of the relationship. The US is still a major trading partner of China, representing about 15% of China's exports currently, and China remains America's second or third largest trading partner, of course, after Canada, and the largest source of America's of US imports. But trade volumes that were once a major source of ballast in the bilateral relationship have been declining now for almost a decade, even as tensions and all of these other dimensions of the relationship rise. The U.S. currently has about 30% tariffs on Chinese goods and other trade, investment, and technology restrictions, including on exports of advanced computer chips. And China has hit back with tariffs on all U.S. goods and has targeted key exports for restrictions. This year, the U.S. has seen zero new soybean orders from China. That's a major blow as we have a peak harvest in the United States of soybeans. That's a dramatic shift from the past. Even in 2024, China imported about $13 billion of U.S. soybeans. Despite declining soybean exports to China for some time, China's also restricting exports to the United States of rare earths, which impact not only U.S. industrial production, things like cars, but also military production as well. I should mention that the issue of the status of Taiwan continues to loom large in the relationship, with some in Washington now describing the island as a de facto ally of the United States and arguing for more and more U.S. military commitments to the island, which Beijing, of course, sees as a renegade province since its opponent in the Chinese Civil War fled to Taiwan in 1949. And China is determined to reunify with Taiwan. The Chinese sometimes use the proverb of two tigers on one mountain to describe the tensions between the United States and China as the invariable outcome of two powerful states who cannot coexist in the same region without challenging each other. Some American observers explain Sino-American tensions as rooted in the nature of the two countries' political systems. The argument has been that the PRC's Marxist-Leninist heritage sets it inevitably at odds with the United States' historically liberal heritage. Here, the parable of the scorpion and the frog is sometimes used. Each nation views engagement or cooperation as inherently risky, worried that the other's fundamental nature will cause the other harm. Of course, in the fable, when a frog agrees to carry a scorpion across a river, convinced the scorpion will not sting it, as this would be irrational, as both will drown, the frog agrees, but the scorpion stings the frog anyway. As they both drown, the scorpion explains, "It's my nature." Those American analysts who argue that the U.S. never should have cooperated with China take this view. Others in the United States see the U.S.-China relationship more in terms of the game theory concept of prisoner's dilemma. Basically, the idea is that the two nations could benefit from cooperation, but remain so trapped by mutual suspicions that even though trust and collaboration would have brought about a better outcome for both, they will not pursue cooperation. Maybe all three of these fables or parables are relevant to the state of U.S.-China relations. But what is clear is that a relationship that was once an engine for enormous wealth, global growth, that stimulated global scientific progress, and that held the key to addressing many global challenges, not least the least climate change, is at one of its most precarious points in decades. Of course, this is an unpredictable time, and it's possible that even just this week we may see the beginning of some improvements in the relationship. We've recently seen some new dialogue in the U.S.-China relationship in Madrid, where U.S. Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent was speaking with his Chinese counterpart, Vice Premier He Lifeng. It also appears that U.S. President Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping will speak on Friday. It's not clear what they're going to talk about, but there's speculation that they are planning a state visit by Trump to Beijing in October following the Seoul APEC summit. Bear with me now as I offer a few brief remarks about the history of U.S.-China relations that I think are useful context for where we are today. I think I was glad to hear about all the historical perspectives that previous speakers have shared, but so often we fail to take into account the long and complicated history of relations between the two countries, and it might be helpful to our discussion today just to offer a snapshot of the relationship's past. As has often been observed, if the United States and China can be compared to tigers, frogs, or scorpions, the U.S.-China relationship has been described as more like a turbulent romance. The two powers are capable of extraordinary affinity for each other, but also of bitter disappointment and acrimony. American attraction to China has, from the very earliest years of U.S. contact with China, been centered on China's vast market, its own aspirations to convert China to its own ideals. This started in the 18th century with furs and ginseng, and then on to opium on the one hand, and then the regular stream of American missionaries on the other. By the 20th century, it had become dreams of vast consumer markets. I still remember early in the U.S.-China trade relationship, one representative, I think, of Bausch and Lomb saying, 2 billion eyes of vast consumer markets, and then the spread of more liberal and democratic values to China from the United States. And China's attraction to America began with seeing the United States as a beautiful country. The word for America in Chinese is Meiguo, beautiful country, somehow different from other Western powers, reinforced by the modernizing impulse of many Americans in China. Americans funded a lot of hospitals and schools with the so-called Boxer indemnity, for example, and then later as a model of both successful development to be emulated and, of course, as a strategic partner against common enemies. When U.S. President Nixon made his breakthrough trip to China in 1972, he and then Chinese leader Mao Zedong found common strategic ground against the Soviet Union, paving the way for around 2 decades when the United States and China were in what is often called the honeymoon period, with the U.S. even sharing military technology with its quasi-ally. This changed dramatically after the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989, creating the first major rupture in the relationship since 1972. But the two countries were back in each other's arms again with U.S. support for China's WTO entry in 2001 and some security cooperation following the 9/11 attack on the United States. And then relations enjoyed nearly 3 decades of growing economic ties and people-to-people contact. However, strains reemerged during the Obama administration as China under Hu Jintao began asserting its national interests more forcefully in the South China Sea in particular, and flexed its capabilities to challenge the United States in the strategic high ground of outer space. Some of you might remember the 2007 ASAT debris generating test that generated more space debris than any other test of any satellite weapon in history. But it was really after Xi Jinping replaced Hu Jintao as China's top leader in 2012-2013 with a declared mission to strengthen the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party in China and restore China's greatness that tensions escalated significantly. Not only were China's intensified efforts to make inroads towards securing its South China Sea and Sea of Japan territorial claims, actions that involved U.S. allies, Philippines and Japan, and challenged the principle of freedom of navigation, those were major sources of friction, but they also, combined with Xi's Made in China 2025 plan to increase domestic content in high-tech products and new evidence of Chinese industrial espionage, added momentum to rising concerns in Washington about the imminent threat that China might pose to American primacy. It was Trump's first term, however, that marked the beginning of systematic U.S. economic warfare against China and others, and China's marked hostility to the United States. On the U.S. side, it wasn't only about trade. The administration's 2017 national security strategy took a much harder line toward China than had the previous U.S. administration, characterizing China in the international system as a revisionist power that was seeking both regional hegemony and global dominance. Trump 1.0 reframed the relationship as in a new era of competition and launched a trade war with China that ended mutual trade growth that had averaged 14 or 15% annually for nearly 4 decades. The Trump-initiated decoupling of our two economies extended beyond economics into science and technology, historically a cornerstone of the relationship and something that had intrigued me so much when I was a 19-year-old. Academic exchanges were curtailed, joint research programs were canceled, visa restrictions made it harder and harder for Chinese students and researchers to study in American universities and work in US labs. The pandemic intensified tensions between the two countries as Trump blamed China for COVID-19, and China punched back with tit-for-tat tariffs and other restrictions, as well as a harsh campaign of criticism against the United States as it prolonged its own global COVID shutdown. After Joe Biden was elected, rather than resetting U.S.-China relations, his administration doubled down on concerns about China's competitiveness and unfair trade practices. An early 2021 meeting between U.S. and Chinese diplomats, you may remember, in Alaska, that many saw as a way forward to pave an improvement in the relationship, became literally a shouting match between the two sides. Biden proved very effective at building coalitions against China through AUKUS, the Quad, and strengthened alliances, while China pursued the Belt and Road Initiative and other regional and global initiatives more assertively across 150 countries. China's sustained support for Russia after its 2022 invasion of Ukraine, while stopping short of weapons sales, aligned Beijing more closely with Moscow against the West, declaring a no-limits partnership and providing dual-use technology and component parts to Russian drones, and refusing to stand with the EU and the United States in banning imports of Russian energy. On the economic front, China's Xi made a virtue of decoupling, accelerating China's pursuit of technological and economic self-sufficiency while promoting alternative visions for global governance. Trump's return as president has brought in a Trump part deux, an even more mercantilistic America determined to remake the global trading system on new terms, which includes reducing China's competitiveness with the United States in key high-tech sectors. But this second Trump administration has discovered that it has a lot less leverage over China than it did in Trump 1.0. China has restructured its trade relationships. ASEAN now collectively surpasses the United States as China's top trading partner. It's not that U.S. economic pressure has not affected China. U.S. controls on advanced chips and manufacturing equipment have hit China very hard. But as mentioned, China has used its dominance of rare earths productions and reserves of rare earths to hit back. Amid these trade tensions, bilateral military tensions have also been on the rise. Here, the United States also confronts a far more capable China than during Trump 1.0. Beijing has been accelerating the development of advanced weapon systems, including hypersonic missiles and naval and other deep sea capabilities that are putting immense pressure on U.S. military supremacy in the Western Pacific in particular. And Taiwan remains a dangerous flashpoint, as I suggested earlier. The Taiwan Strait has become an arena for tests of China's military operations. China's PLA now engages regularly in exercises that infringe on Taiwan's air and near seas buffer zones, with hundreds of incursions in some months and a multi-day Strait Thunder exercise that simulated a blockade straining Taiwan's air and maritime defense just a few months ago. This increased PLA presence around Taiwan is just one indicator that the risks of a military confrontation between the United States and China are on the rise. If we look to military indicators, as noted, Chinese military pressure on Taiwan has risen dramatically. It's reached what U.S. Indo-PACOM Commander Admiral Samuel Paparo calls a rapid boil, with a 300% annual increase in military pressure. Defense, or maybe War Secretary Pete Hegseth recently warned that a Chinese attack could be imminent, meaning attack on Taiwan. As I remarked, China is conducting increasingly realistic dress rehearsal exercises, with the PLA practicing precision strikes on key Taiwan targets. In a recent podcast conversation with Kaiser Kuo, which I commend to you, retired PLA Senior Colonel Zhou Bo described the former U.S. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi's 2022 visit to Taiwan as a gift to the PLA because it opened the door to the kinds of massive near-island exercises that have been ongoing since and have improved PLA readiness for a Taiwan military contingency, while now making it very difficult for observers to determine if the exercises China is engaging in are exercises or the beginning of an invasion. We also should consider cyber indicators. U.S. agencies assess that Chinese state-sponsored actors like Volt Typhoon, Salt Typhoon, are positioning themselves within critical U.S. infrastructure networks, enabling them to disrupt functions at the time of their choosing. These are hackers lying in wait, conducting what experts call weapons tests in cyber terms. And the targeting focuses particularly on Guam and West Coast systems related to a military response to Taiwan scenarios. There are other indicators that suggest that the risk of escalation has risen. China has warned against playing with fire over Taiwan, declaring Taiwan a red line issue, but recent shifts in U.S. language have removed traditional diplomatic formulations about not supporting Taiwan independence. This is a big red line for China. So to all of these indicators, we should add a new source of strategic uncertainty. For example, a recent report in the journal Politico of a leaked draft of the Pentagon's new national defense strategy proposes a dramatic strategic shift that could redirect the U.S. military focus from countering China and Russia to focusing instead on the U.S. homeland and projecting power throughout the Western Hemisphere. Makes us all nervous. This development creates profound uncertainty about U.S. commitment to Taiwan's defense and could signal to Beijing either an opportunity to act while America is distracted, or it could reduce immediate pressure, particularly if China's perception is that the U.S. is on the decline. That might allow for more cautious approaches that would avoid the use of force by Beijing against Taiwan. So to make my penultimate point, where's the relationship going? Can there be romance again? It's very hard to prognosticate given the many global challenges that we face and Trump's preference for uncertainty and volatility. On the one hand, despite current tensions, the relationship's romantic past does promise improved relations might still be possible. On the other hand, other trends suggest a grimmer future. I see three scenarios for U.S.-China relations. Scenario one, relationship stability. Maybe Trump will have a great state visit to China and the two sides will agree to make the U.S.-China relationship great again, halting the escalation of trade wars and military tensions through tariff reduction agreements and other agreements. While not resolving fundamental strategic competition, this could provide breathing room and reduce accidental conflict risks. Scenario 2, sustained low-level conflict. This would mean a new normal of managed competition, neither full confrontation nor meaningful cooperation. The two sides would continue to decouple economically and technologically, but they would maintain diplomatic relations. This would be more akin to a kind of Cold War-style competition. It could persist for decades, particularly as China builds up its nuclear arsenal towards strategic parity with the United States. Scenario 3, unfortunately, escalating conflict. This is a scenario in which tensions erupt and escalate into conflict. And this is plausible, unfortunately, given behaviors on both sides. The erosion of operational warning time with a frequent face-off of US and Chinese military craft in the Western Pacific mean that US decision makers now have very little time and much less certainty to respond if China initiates action. More critically, as some of us have written, including the National Defense University's Joel Wuthnow in a recent foreign affairs piece, wars of chance are increasingly likely. You have individual Chinese pilots and sailors engaging in increasingly reckless behavior, similar to the 2001 EP3 incident when a Chinese J-8 crashed into a US surveillance plane, forcing all 24 of US crew to land on Hainan without prior authorization, but also tragically resulting in the death of the J-8 pilot. However, I have to say, if Politico magazine's report of the leaked Pentagon report is correct, and the Pentagon's plan marks a new strategic pivot toward homeland and hemispheric defense, that really introduces a wild card. Reading the Chinese press, Chinese military analysts view the shift as signaling an inevitable waning of Washington's global power that might be bad news for Taiwan. And so that could suggest that Beijing may be tempted to act while America is distracted or focused elsewhere. Or again, it could mean more patient approaches. We can imagine that this kind of decoupling and these tensions will accelerate over time, resulting in very complete separation of technological systems and creating really incompatible, technologically founded global economic blocs. And that's really bad for all of us. So let me conclude by commenting on what US tensions might mean for the world. Already having the two largest economies and most powerful nations locked in strategic competition has carried immense economic costs. We're all paying for it. Together accounting for over 40% of global GDP and nearly 25% of world trade, US-China decoupling is forcing every country to navigate between the two powers. And the need to adapt to the economic uncertainty is expensive. It lowers global investment and it increases our prices. In addition, tensions between the two countries is speeding the fragmentation of technology and global governance, and that's making it much harder to address the world's ability to address transnational challenges like climate change, pandemic preparedness, nuclear nonproliferation, cybersecurity, AI governance, etc. Finally, US-China tensions and risks of military escalation mean that all countries have to plan for contingencies and arm against the risk of conflict. And I would think that for Canada specifically, US-China competition creates both many immediate challenges amid this uncertainty, making long-term planning with a historically critical economic and security partner extremely difficult. I also think, though, maybe, and I'm kind of echoing remarks made by the head of the World Trade Organization, maybe this very optimistic remarks, maybe this moment could mark opportunities for so-called middle powers. I don't know if Canada likes that moniker or being a middle power, if it's offensive. I mean, after all, you're larger territorially than the United States. But it seems to me that coalition building opportunities are actually expanding as US-China competition may energize other powers to work together in new ways. And I'm thinking about some of you who are who follow trade developments, trade governance developments, the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, the CPTPP, TPP, which Canada played a key role in rescuing after the U.S. withdrew in the last Trump administration, that sort of exemplifies this potential. You could have similar coalitions in which Canada could play a key role on climate, technology, governance, trade rules. The Arctic, for example, we've already seen Canada launch a new strategic security dialogue on the Arctic. All of those are roles that Canada could play constructively that would contribute to global stability. So for my final thought, while the romantic metaphor for U.S.-China does suggest that reconciliation could be possible, behaviors on both the U.S. and Chinese sides have aggravated mistrust and animosity, and this suggests, sadly, that the parables of mistrust and risk are going to remain more apt as we watch and seek to manage the relationship going forward. So thanks for your attention. Sorry for going on too long, and I look forward to your questions and corrections. Thank
you. Hello, everyone. I was going to introduce myself, but my colleague, Dr. Kosa, already introduced, so thank you so much. I'm just here to make very short closing remarks. On behalf of University of Manitoba community, I would like to thank Dr. Freeman for your very illuminating lecture and engaging Q&A. And this is a small gift from us. And the Tony Lau lectureship allows us to bring in renowned scholars and specialists to share their expertise and insight on contemporary China. And I feel this conversation is only becoming more timely and relevant given the situation we are in, not just in North America, but globally. So on that note, I also would like to thank Dr. Tony Lau for his very generous support that enables us to continue this very important initiative on campus. And of course, this event would not have been possible without everyone here in the audience. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming and sharing your thought. And I know you have a lot of questions for Dr. Freeman. So I would like to invite everyone to the reception outside this room and continue having some conversation over good food and beverages. So thank you so much.